Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the First Strike Podcast. I'm your host, and I go by the Marathon Don. Here in the First Strike Podcast, we strike first and we talk later. So thank you so much for tuning in. On this week's episode, I'm going to share the final verdict, our final verdict on the Raja Jackson situation. And we're also going to talk about the co-main event and the main event of UFC Paris that took place last night. So just to recap, to what led us to where we are today regarding the Raja Jackson situation, which is where we're going to start. Raja Jackson is the son of UFC Hall of Famer Rampage Jackson. And by this point, unless you've been living under a rock, like you know the story, you know what happened. But for those that need a little bit of a refresher, Raja Jackson, he was streaming on the Kick platform. And he got invited to a pro wrestling show that is in some way either owned or affiliated with the legendary Rikishi. And once he gets invited to the show, he's backstage walking around meeting wrestlers, and he meets this wrestler named Psycho Stu, who proceeds to hit him over the head with a beer can. And obviously it's pro wrestling, so he didn't completely hit him over the head. It was basically Psycho Stu was in character, so he hit him over the beer, but you could clearly see that he hits his hand. So he hit Raja Jackson, who did not appreciate it at all, wasn't aware this was going to take place at any point of the situation, and right away became furious. And, you know, at the moment, he didn't do anything. And there were he was live streaming the whole thing. He was pissed off. There was, several pleasantries or non-pleasantries exchanged. He was just, mouthing off, but he didn't do anything, right? So there's other wrestlers that tell him, that Psycho Stu, even himself, he tells him, like, hey, you're not going to sell it? Because basically he was trying to like be in character and promote some sort of pro wrestling angle. And other wrestlers tell him later on in the show, while they're streaming, they're like, hey, you could get your receipts later on in the fight, later on in the night. So it was planned that Raja Jackson, he would interfere in the match that Psycho Stu's taking place, and he was supposed to get some sort of get back. So either way, after the beer can incident happened, all the pro wrestlers apologized. Raja Jackson accepted the apology, and later on throughout the stream, you can see him talking to the fans on the live stream, talking about how he's gonna get his revenge, talking about how he was super pissed, he's still pissed, and how he's gonna F up Psycho Stu. He proceeds to jump in the ring, does some sort of like a body slam, completely knocks out Psycho Stu, and lands over 20 unanswered punches, almost borderline killing him, barely killing him, and putting him in the hospital, and leaves the arena, still mouthing off to some wrestlers that kind of like chasing him down in the backstage. And thank God Psycho Stu survived the incident. It was barbaric, it was ruthless, and I think the final number was like around 21 unanswered strikes. I mean, 21 strikes after he was already unconscious. There were reports that Psycho Stu was choking on his broken teeth and his blood. There was reports that he was flatlined, that he may or may not have made it. Thank God he seems to have been, he seems to be recovering, and thank God he's alive. As of today, my understanding is that he's already been released from the hospital and he's home recovering. Raja Jackson has gone radio silent as it stands today. He has not been arrested. Rampage Jackson went on Ariel Helwani and completely, talked about how his son's actions were deplorable and he's not in agreement with it. Talking about how he's been receiving racist threats and how Raja Jackson, he's not talking to him at the moment. And I mean, at this point in the game, Raja Jackson is not arrested, is not facing any charges, and Rampage Jackson seems to be distancing himself from his son for a little bit. Raja Jackson, by the way, is 25 years old. So where do we stand on this? It was deplorable. It was borderline. It was a felony, 100%. It was attempted murder. I think that throughout the night, you could see, first of all, that Raja Jackson was humiliated by the beer can interaction. But not only was he humiliated because of it happened, it was further escalated because he was live streaming. So not only was he pissed off that he got, hit upside the head with the beer can, but because he was live streaming the incident, you had all these folks on the internet, just providing commentary and giving them their feedback. So it was almost like it happened in front of an audience, around the world. And later on in the night, even before he stepped into the ring, you could see that Rampage Jackson, his father, he called him, and he kind of he didn't mention the incident, and he downplayed what he was doing. But Rampage Jackson still kind of was making some jokes of why he's there at a pro wrestling event. And throughout the night, you could just see that Raja Jackson continued to get pissed off. You can see where everything was escalating in his head, where he was like, I was embarrassed, I have to get revenge, I have to get payback. And to that point, it becomes premeditated, right? Because he's planning it. He's methodically thinking about what's he going to do once he gets in the ring. And I think that his only saving grace is the fact that Psycho Stu's a performer. So because he's a performer and he agreed to be in the ring, I'm sure that there were waivers involved. And I think that's the main reason why there hasn't been any charges that have been pressed, because there's other wrestlers. And to my understanding, the other wrestler that told him that he could get his receipt, he's involved with the administration of the show. So Psycho Stu agreed to be in the angle with Raja Jackson. There was agreed that there was going to be some sort of physical interaction, and then they waived to some extent the liability of the result of those physical actions. So I think that's what happened, and that's the reason why at this point there are no charges filed. Because what happens is in those type of sports, even if I agree to do a pro wrestling match, I'm doing what's called a harmless hold release. Whereas if anything happens to me, I'm not gonna hold anybody accountable because I agree and I waive my rights, to that accountability or to that responsibility when I sign the waiver just to get in the ring. It's like if something happens, it's not the company's fault, it's not the people's fault. So by both of them agreeing to the angle, I think that's the reason why Raja Jackson is not facing charges. I think he should face charges. I think that for him to be someone that's been training MMA, as part of MMA, he does jiu-jitsu, he does striking. You should have you should be aware of what is too far. Part of being a MMA athlete is knowing your limitations, knowing when to pull back, having the discipline to pull back on your opponents. I mean, there's so much honor in the sport of mixed martial arts. And with Raja Jackson at that particular moment, I didn't see any honor. You hit the man that was already unconscious. To any fighter or any MMA athlete with integrity, once an opponent is knocked out or submits, the fight is over. The battle is over, and you respect all your opponents. You respect anyone that trains in any of the disciplines. And the fact that, Psycho Stu was knocked out and he continued to hit him over 20 times, there's no integrity. There's no respect. It was premeditated murder or premeditated murder attempt or attempted murder. At the minimum, it had to be considered assault, and I do think that he should get some jail time. I think he took it way too far. I think it was beyond, even if you hit him once or twice after he was already knocked out, the fact that you're an MMA fighter, you're fully mounted, just hitting someone that's not even a threat, I think he took it way too far. At the end of the day, he should face the repercussions of his actions. And I think by him not facing any sort of disciplinary action is a scary thing, because now he got away with it. And now he may think that's okay for him to do it again. And regardless of how angry you are, violence is never the answer. Especially, if you're a trained fighter. You have to have that discipline to hold yourself back. I do want to take a moment to talk a little bit about Rampage Jackson. And I don't think that all the negative feedback that Rampage Jackson is receiving is warranted. Yes, he's the father of Raja Jackson, but guess what? Raja Jackson is a 25-year-old man that is fully responsible for his actions, fully aware of what he's doing. He's not mentally incompetent. He knew what he was doing. He made his own decisions. He never consulted Rampage Jackson. Rampage Jackson denounced all those activities. He never supported any of those items, and there would have been severe repercussions. Rampage Jackson said himself, if he knew what Raja was going to do, he would have talked him out of it, and if anything, he would have gone to the arena himself. So I don't think that Rampage Jackson deserves any of the heat that he's getting. I think it's a very unfortunate situation for everybody involved. Psycho Stu did wrong as well. He should have never hit someone with a beer can that is not aware of the angle that's going on. Roger Jackson's 100% wrong and should do jail time, but I don't think that Psycho Stu is as innocent as it seems. I think he also has some culpability in the fact that he hit him with a beer can first. And I think the only way that any sort of retaliation would have been warranted if it happened immediately. Because when Roger Jackson, when he got hit, if he would have immediately hit Psycho Stu, then it would have been a situation where it was self-defense, or it was, he was just defending himself. He got attacked and he proceeded to defend himself. And I think in any perspective, anybody that would have looked at that situation would have been okay with it. They would have been like, hey, you know what? Psycho Stu deserved it. He hit him with a beer can. Roger Jackson didn't agree to that angle. Because at the end of the day, just because you're a pro wrestler and backstage doesn't give you the liberty to work any angle with anybody. Like, two people have to agree. That's what makes pro wrestling what it is. When you're with your opponent, both of you guys are agreeing and playing a part in all the moves. One person conducts the move, the other person has to sell it, right? You're only as good as your partner. So by Psycho Stu taking that liberty, like, he's actually doing a disservice to the pro wrestling community, because that's not the pro wrestling code. That's not what pro wrestling is about. It's about working as a team. So by him just hitting him with a beer can, you're actually going against what pro wrestling stands for. And 100% he deserves some sort of like repercussion, but not that. Not what happened in the ring. Not borderline losing his life, losing teeth, getting knocked unconscious, losing brain cells. Who knows what types of permanent damage may have been caused by this accident. And if there is permanent damage, we're not even going to know today. So I think that the final verdict on this situation is that Rampage Jackson, please leave him alone. He's a UFC Hall of Famer, just trying to provide for his family. He is in no way, shape, or form involved in the incident, so I don't understand why he's receiving any backlash at all. Just because he's a father and they seem to have some sort of relationship on screen, we don't know what happens behind the scenes, so we can't blame the father for the actions of his son, who happens to be a grown-ass man. Roger Jackson should face jail time, at least some sort of assault charges. I would recommend at least 2 to 3 years in jail or prison for him to reflect on his actions and know that you can't do that. You can't do what you did. You got to be able to control your anger, or otherwise you shouldn't be in an environment where that anger could lead to actions like this. In terms of Psycho Stu, we hope he makes a full recovery. We wish you nothing but the best. And 100%, to all pro wrestlers, please don't take liberties with your opponents. Please don't take liberties with anyone that has not agreed to work certain angles, for your safety. You never know what can result out of something that no one agreed to, out of something that you took into your hands, right? So that's the final verdict. We wish it's a very unfortunate situation. There is no winning party or positive outcome. The only slither of positivity is the fact that Psycho Stu survived the assault. But it's a lose-lose for the wrestling promotion. It's a lose-lose for Roger Jackson, who should face some sort of jail time. I hope he don't get away with it. If he does get away with it, I hope that there's some other sort of repercussions, and I just think that the reason why he's going to get away with it is because of possibly the waivers that are involved. And so that's the final verdict on the Psycho Stu and the Raja Jackson situation. Very, very unfortunate incident. And now shifting the page to UFC Paris, which took place last night. Specifically, I want to talk about the co-main event and the main event. So the co-main event, it was Mauricio Ruffy versus Benoit Saint Denis, BSD, and wow, what a fantastic win by BSD. Someone who has who's looked a little, who's had a little challenges recently. He lost against Dustin Poirier, hasn't really looked the same since that fight against someone that just coming out of a highlight reel knockout, in his last fight, someone who's riding a win streak. What I saw in this fight was that BSD, with his grappling and his takedown abilities, just got Ruffy so uncomfortable. Ruffy was gun shy. He was very hesitant. And when he did swing, I don't think that he was able to plant his feet and commit because of the takedown threat of BSD. It was a fantastic strategy. I loved it, and a much needed win for Benoit, who had the crowd going out of control with that victory. Much needed win. I think that he was also throwing some really good body kicks that was slowing Ruffy down and just switching levels constantly. Really outworking him in the grappling department made all the difference. So congratulations on a job well done. And where he goes from here, I would like to see him continue to string some fights against the bottom 10 of the division. I think Ruffy was ranked number 7, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, a very big win for BSD. And I hope that he continues to grow and continues to get those victories and chain them together. In the main event of the UFC Paris, it's very possible that we might have our next number 1 contender, because Nasruddin and Maves completely shut down Kyle Borralho with fast hands, beautiful leg work, footwork, in and out, in the pocket, really chaining together some nice combinations. And it's funny too, because at the post-fight press conference or the post-fight interview, Borralho mentioned that he wanted to make the fight exciting for the fans, and he did that, and that's why he abandoned a lot of his grappling. But I think otherwise. I think that Imov looks fantastic. I think in the small few grappling exchanges that they did have, Imov just looked like the bigger, stronger man. And boy, did he look fast. Like every time they got in the pocket, he was just chaining together these combinations, where Borralho was kind of like pot-shotting a little bit. Like he'll throw 1 or 2 punches, but not really those fluid combinations that Imov was just letting go in the pocket. We're talking about 3-4 punches. Very competitive matchup. The funny thing is that I do think that later on in rounds 4 and 5, Borralho actually looked better. I got to give a big shout out to both men for their fantastic cardio and stamina. Both guys look fantastic headed into the 5th round. But I do think that Borralho started landing the cleaner punches later on. It seemed like Imov slowed down just a little bit, that Borralho was able to get the timing down and land some beautiful straight hands down the pike. You know, did he do enough to warrant the title shot? I don't know. It was a lopsided decision, right? Like, maybe not lopsided, but Imov got the victory and won most of the rounds. But did he do enough to earn the shot against Chimaev? I think that we would have to sit down and watch what happens with the Anthony Hernandez fight against Reiner. I think honestly, I would like to see a tournament. I would like to see Imov fight the winner of the Anthony Hernandez matchup. I think that's the best way to do it. Why not? Classic style. Let's do a complete tournament, because Imov looked good, but Borralho also looked good, and it kind of seemed like in the 4th or 5th round, you know, Borralho was bouncing back. So it was an impressive fight. Great stand-up, good footwork. However, I don't think that it's something that screams a number 1 contender yet. However, you know, when you add that with the highlight reel knockout of Adesanya, then his win streak does start to look a little bit better. So what I would like to see happen, I would like to see Imov fight the winner of the Anthony Hernandez fight. And then for Borralho, I don't think that his stock takes much of a dip at all. He looked like a superstar before the event. I think he's developing, you know, he's such a fun character. He's an action-packed fighter. He has a fan base. And I think that he should just definitely stay fighting the top 10 of the division. I don't have any particular names that come to mind, but someone like a Jared Cannonier would be a great fight. And yeah, that's a wrap. UFC Paris definitely delivered. Great card overall. I love the co-main event and the main event. And looking forward, we have big fight week for the boxing world and Zuffa Boxing and Dana White, with the mega fight going on Netflix with Canelo Alvarez going up against the undefeated Terence Crawford for the undisputed middleweight champion. And this is going to be a legendary fight. There's a few fights in the history of boxing and combat sports that really stop time and the world just stands still. And I think this is one of those fights. I think that you have a multiple weight undisputed champion, Terence Crawford, moving up to fight an all-time great like Canelo. You know, both guys are very competitive. Both guys have massive egos. Both guys are there to win, and they rarely lose. In Canelo's case, he's only lost twice. Terence Crawford's undefeated. So, to some extent, someone's gotta go. Even when Canelo does lose, he rarely loses in a lopsided way, where he takes a lot of damage. Like, he's lost decisions to Floyd Mayweather early on in his career, and then he lost when he moved up in weight. So what's gonna happen? I don't know, but you got to tune in to find out. I'm gonna have a preview show midweek where I'm gonna make some predictions for the main event and the co-main event. So stay tuned to that. And the last thing that I do want to touch base on before we wrap up this episode is WWE. Yes, WWE. Notable news this week coming out the world of pro wrestling is the return of AJ Lee. Welcome back, AJ Lee. I love what the WWE is doing with the women's division. AJ Lee returned to WWE after 10 years to support her husband, her real-life husband, CM Punk, in the angle with Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. I love it. I think it's fantastic for WWE. It's the shot in the arm that the women's division needed, and she's just such a big star, and to have her come back in Chicago was just fantastic. So shout out to WWE for everything that they're doing and all the success they're having. And this is it for this episode of the First Strike Podcast. I go by the Marathon Don. If you like this, you like combat sports, make sure you tune in. Each and every week, I drop a brand new episode. So on this week's episode, we talked about Roger Jackson, and we talked about UFC Paris. So make sure you tune in for this upcoming week where we'll be talking about the Canelo Alvarez versus Crawford mega fight. I go by the Marathon Don. This is the First Strike Podcast, and we are out.